I have been shouting out two things in recent weeks. One is to say, yes, 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 Black Lives Matter. And I want to explain in a moment to some of my white friends who may not know why it's so important to shout that out, why I'm shouting that out. At the same time, I have been giving warnings about the official Black Lives Matter movement and organization and saying it is not something you want to be part of as a follower of Jesus. Now, I posted this on Facebook and Twitter last night so I could be as loud and clear as possible. I said this: Black Lives Matter, all caps. Every Black life matters, all caps. All Black lives matter, all caps. Black lives do matter, all caps. God himself affirms that Black lives matter, all caps. Then in small letters. And the BLM organization is dangerous, anti-Christian, and should be avoided. Have I made myself clear? Now, here's the perspective. Many white Christians answer with, yeah, but all lives matter. So let's think of this. It's during the Holocaust. You are Corrie ten Boom and her family. You are rescuing Jews fleeing from a death sentence by the Nazis. And someone says to the ten Boom family, why do you risk your lives to save these Jews? And they say, Jewish lives matter. What if the people said, well, Dutch lives matter, well, German lives matter, well, all lives matter? That would be missing the point, because the ones that are particularly endangered there would be Jewish lives. In the same way, through American history, it has often been the national mentality that Black lives matter less, or Black lives don't matter at all. And many in the Black community feel that is still often the attitude. And therefore, it is important to affirm and say, yes, Black lives matter, period. At the same time, there is an organization which has specific goals, specific direction, and as I will open up to you in a moment, is coming from a very, very different spirit. In fact, this may shock you with what I'm going to say, but I'm going to tie this in with the spirit of Jezebel in a moment. Okay, let's look at this headline. ABC News says this: from the start, Black Lives Matter has been about LGBTQ lives. 2 of 3 Black Lives Matter founders identify as queer. That's well known. That's an open secret. And prioritizing LGBTQ issues has been of high priority to the Black Lives Matter movement. So we'll just say BLM to separate that from the statement that Black Lives Matter. So the 3 founders of BLM are all women, obviously gifted, obviously great communicators, visionary, strategists. They've obviously got a lot going for them to be as effective as they are and to have galvanized a movement the way that they have. So credit to them for what they have done in terms of their abilities, but it's a shame in terms of much of what they are standing for. So let's take a look what they actually say about themselves, who these women are, what their ideologies are. So Patrice Khan-Cullors, one of the co-founders, a 2015 video clip, and we'll look at a headline in a moment. She described herself as a trained Marxist. She also came out as queer as a teenager. Her words, queer, okay? So that's Patrice Khan-Cullors. I just want you to understand her background, her thought. And these are major issues and statements. Then Alicia Garza, also identified as a, quote, queer Black woman. It's on the official site. She says we must view this epidemic, police brutality, etc., through a lens of race, gender, sexual orientation, and gender identity. This is not just about Black. This is about Black, queer, Black, trans, Black, gay, Black, lesbian, right at the top of the list. And then the third one, Opal Tometi, and I may not be pronouncing each name exactly right. She is described as a transnational feminist and a student of liberation theology. Okay? A student of liberation theology. New York Post article, but widely reported in the news. Video in 2015. Again, Patrice Cullors, Black Lives Matter co-founder, describes herself as trained Marxist. No surprise given the ideology. Then Acton Institute, a few years ago, did a major article. It's worth looking at, worth reading. The Marxist Roots of Black Liberation Theology. Now, liberation theology in general is not just Jesus came to set people free. Oh, no. Much, much more than that. And yes, it is clearly Marxist ideology. And then Black liberation theology is decidedly Marxist theology. So BLM has clear Marxist ideology in its roots and very, very aggressively, very, very clearly radical feminist and radical trans queer activism. So let's look at their actual statement. Let's go to the website and let's look at the statement, what we believe, all right? And I want to highlight a few things on this statement. And we won't scroll through all of it, but everything I'm saying is directly from the current website statement. This is not an outside report. This is what's actually there. Let me highlight a few things to you. There are 3 references to mothers. We don't need that on the screen now. There are 3 references to mothers in the document. There are 0, as in none. There are no references to fathers. Not a single one. Not a single mention of fathers in the document. Mothers are mentioned, parents are mentioned, but not a single mention of fathers. Where man is mentioned, or anything patriarchal, it is negative. Here, let me read some of the statements. We make our spaces family-friendly and enable parents to fully participate with their children. We dismantle the patriarchal practice that requires mothers to work double shifts so that they can mother in private even as they participate in public justice work. So the patriarchal practice is that the man doesn't really work the way the wife works, as opposed to they have a shared life with shared responsibilities. No, patriarchal, that's bad, all right? And then reference to men, and it says this. It speaks of women who are in an impressive male environment. I'm just going through the document. There are 4 references to trans. 4. Not a single reference to fathers. Any reference to men, patriarchal, negative. Okay? 4 references to trans. We make space for transgender brothers and sisters to participate and lead. We are self-reflexive and do the work required to dismantle cisgender privilege. This is not just white privilege, but cisgender privilege. In other words, heterosexual privilege. They want to dismantle that. And uplift Black trans folk, especially Black trans women who continue to be disproportionately impacted by trans antagonist violence. There's also reference to, look at this, actual or perceived sexual identity, gender expression. So that's even more trans-related issues. And then one more reference to queer along the way. And as for heterosexuality, cisgender privilege comes against that. We foster a queer affirming network. When we gather, we do so with the intention of freeing ourselves from the tight grip of heteronormative thinking. So heterosexuality, heteronormative thinking that the norm is to be heterosexual, all this is to be opposed as a foundational mindset of the BLM movement. Friends, this is why we have been sounding the alarm as loudly as we have. The only reference to religious beliefs is religious beliefs or disbeliefs. Can't even just say religious beliefs or disbeliefs. Everyone, welcome. Now, let's take this a little further. The spirit of radical feminism, the spirit of queer theology, the spirit of Marxist liberationism, these are all foundational to the BLM movement, which identifies as a movement. It is an organization. It has branches. It is not just a theory or a concept. So we separate the cause of justice. We separate the affirmation that Black Lives Matter from the BLM movement. I was doing a radio interview a couple weeks ago, and the interviewer wanted to talk to me about my book, Jezebel's War with America. Jezebel's War with America came out last August. And when it came out, it sold out the first printing sold out the first week. I never had that happen with any book that I wrote. And somehow the dots were connected. When you look at the table of contents for the book, when you look at the table of contents, you can see that we bring together the spirit of radical feminism, addiction to pornography, shout your abortion movement, the attack on men, the emasculating of men. In addition to that, the war on gender. One thing after another, saying the same demonic forces that operated through Queen Jezebel of old, 3,000 years ago, those same demonic forces are operating today. Connect the dots. The interviewer said to me, how do you think that ties in with the riots and everything that's happening with Donald Trump and so on? And first glance, well, it's unconnected. What do the riots have to do with that? But at second glance, of course it's connected, because at the heart of the BLM movement is a radical feminist, even man-hating spirit. And that in particular rises up against an alpha male like Trump. So he creates enough problems on his own with his misogyny in the past and things like that. On the other hand, there is a concerted radical feminist effort to take Trump down. What does BLM say about taking Trump down? Stay tuned. Let me connect the dots for you one more time. The spirit of radical feminism, the shout your abortion movement, the attack on gender identity, the emasculating of men, the seduction into porn, the rise in witchcraft, all these things we identify with Jezebel, not with a person or a ghost, but the same demonic powers that work through Jezebel work today, and they are at work in a concerted way in America. And when you have a man like Trump, who is an alpha male and like a bull in a china shop, on the one hand, many women will not like him because of his past, his playboy past, and his narcissism and things like that. But there's also a spiritual attack against him, a Jezebelic attack, which contributes to some of the ferocity and intensity of it. So when you see everything coming together, this Jezebelic spirit, and now the riots, we're separating this from the righteous causes of Black Americans. We're separating this from the righteous concerns of Black Americans. We're talking about the spirit of lawlessness and chaos and anarchy and the direct assault on the president in the midst of it. I'm saying it ties in with the Jezebelic spirit, and that Jezebelic spirit is at the heart of the BLM movement. Radical, feminist, queer, exalting, pro-trans, anti-patriarchal, anti-nuclear family, in many ways anti-male movement. And that's what we must see and separate ourselves from. Listen to what Patrisse Cullors, one of the co-founders, again, self-identified Marxist, queer, liberation theology person, all right? Listen to what she has to say about the presidential elections.
A lot of criticism of former Vice President Joe Biden from civil rights activists. The election obviously will be a choice. How do you think Biden matches up compared to President Trump when it comes to these issues that are important to you?
Well, hands down, Trump not only needs to not be in office in November, but he should resign now. Trump needs to be out of office. He is not fit for office. And so what we are going to push for is a move to get Trump out, while we're also going to continue to push and pressure Vice President Joe Biden around his policies and relationship to policing and criminalization. That's going to be important. But our goal is to get Trump out.
Loud and clear. The goal is to get Trump out. Friends, there is a larger agenda afoot. And I encourage you, stand for the truth that Black Lives Matter. Stand for racial reconciliation, stand for biblical justice, and separate yourself from the Jezebelic BLM movement.